It's a privilege, I'd say, to have Chris sharing with us tonight. If you don't know Chris and Dawn, many of you do, but they've been in Simi Valley for 3 years?
Yeah.
Almost 4. Okay. Involved with Cornerstone Church in a number of ways. Chris is on staff at Eternity Bible, teaches some classes among other things. Pastoral ministry for
18 years.
Oh, 18.
Did you say 100?
It only felt like
And
Full-time 18.
Chris is going to be involved. This summer, Cornerstone's going to go through Ecclesiastes. And so he's been spending some time studying that. I'm just going to share from that tonight. And so we're thankful that he's here tonight. So let me pray, and then we'll get into Ecclesiastes a little bit. Father, thank you so much for giving us your word, for giving us your spirit, and the ability to understand and apply what you've given to us, for us that have your spirit living in us, teaching us. I pray that you would teach us tonight, that we would walk away from looking into your word with a change, be that a seemingly small thing or a big thing. We want to be doers, not just hearers. And so would you work in our lives tonight and give Chris just clarity, and thank you for the blessing it is to have him come and teach what he's spent some time studying. I pray that he and Dawn would be blessed by being with us here tonight, and that we could be an encouragement to them. And so just guide our time now, Lord, as we look to your word. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Well, it's certainly a privilege to be here, and I think I've met everybody. We've met everybody that we didn't know. Many of you we did know. And so it's just really cool.
She knows Elise.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's our daughter.
That makes you our daughter.
I accept.
Yeah, our daughter was at EBC from 2008 to 2012. So is that when you overlapped, or?
Yeah, he went to EBC.
Right.
With her, and then I knew her through like Brooke and
Okay.
like those girls.
Like
that
those
we,
one-on-one girls.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. So, has anybody ever had life not go the way you were planning on going?
Yeah. No.
Hi, Chris. Have you ever wondered, have you ever asked yourself the question, who am I? What defines me? Is your identity wrapped up in, or let me put it this way, what is your identity wrapped up in? And you can answer that if you want. Is it being an artist? Is it being a church planter? Is it working at Neiman Marcus? Is it... Where's your identity? Have you ever had your identity crash? What if, I mean, everybody is here because, I'm assuming you're here because Jared, Mary Beth came down here, you're starting to plant a church, you want to see this kind of grow. What if it fails? Jared, Mary Beth, what if it fails? Does that mean you're a failure? That God hasn't blessed it, that there's sin in the camp, and so therefore, it's not supposed to be? Maybe, but maybe not. As Jared said, I've been spending a lot of time in Ecclesiastes lately, and I wanted to share some thoughts from it. Ecclesiastes is a very confusing book of the Bible. And has everybody read Ecclesiastes, or who hasn't read the book of Ecclesiastes? A couple of you haven't. Hopefully after tonight you'll go back and read it and get more confused. One commentator says, no book of the Bible has been so maligned and so misunderstood. Some think that the book of Ecclesiastes is a very godless, existential, cynical book. They read verses like chapter 2, verse 11, where it says, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Does that sound existential? I mean, anybody ever felt that way? Besides Randy? Ecclesiastes is a really easy book to pick out isolated verses like that one and rip them out of context and make it say about anything you want to. You can deny God, you can deny purpose in life, you can teach an absolute hedonistic, pleasure-seeking mentality from Ecclesiastes, but that's a distortion. Hopefully tonight I can give you a little bit of a framework to try to understand it better. Ecclesiastes is a book that wrestles with issues that arise when life doesn't go according to expectations. Now again, that's not very relevant to most of us because all of our lives have gone exactly the way we thought they would when we started out in third grade. But once in a while things go askew. We may suffer when we expect we would have been blessed. Our dreams may die. The dream of my life was taken away from me. Anybody relate? This is my strange dream. I wanted to live in Alaska. My whole life it was all about living in Alaska. And I moved there, met my wife, married her, raised our kids there for part of their lives, and then God took me out of there. And it was like in my 40s, my whole life focus was gone. And my identity was robbed, so to speak. And God used that, of course. But man, that's hard. This is a community, from what I understand, of artists and dancers and musicians, and there's a lot of dreams out there. And maybe
Nice.
Sorry.
for emphasis, and again, I don't know all of you here, but maybe some of you are in that category. Your dreams, you're still trying, and they may not come to fruition. Success may elude us, and so Ecclesiastes speaks to that kind of stuff. But it's a very God-centered book. Ecclesiastes is not a godless, cynical, existential book. It's very God-centered, and we're going to kind of walk through some of these things and see it. And please tonight, as I do this study, I don't want to preach at you. I want to interact with you. So as you have questions, as we're going along, it is so easy to misunderstand what I'm saying. I taught this yesterday to my class in Eternity, and at the end of it, one girl raised her hand. So she says, "So what you're saying is there's no meaning in life?" I said, "No." After an hour of teaching, that's what she heard. So all of you are hearing from a different perspective. And I don't know what that is. So please ask questions. Please clarify. If you think I'm saying X, verify I really am saying X and really not saying Y or Z. So please, I prefer the interaction. We got to start with a word. Chapter 1 and verse 1. Now, it just depends what translation you have. I'm reading out of the NIV here because I'm more comfortable flipping pages in it. The ESV uses the word vanity. The NIV uses the word meaningless. Anybody have a different translation with a different word? Okay, we have meaningless or vanity. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Now, what a great start. I mean, does that sound existential or what? Does that sound like, okay, where is this going? The word that's translated meaningless I'm going to use the word hebel. It's the Hebrew word hebel, and throughout, I'm going to say hebel sometimes instead of meaningless or vanity, because I don't think meaningless gets at what this word is about. I'm not sure vanity does either. So let me just describe the word to you, and then I'll just use that word hebel. It refers to anything that is superficial, insubstantial, incomprehensible, inconsistent, or enigmatic. You got a feel for that now? Mm-hmm. Inconsistent, incomprehensible, confusing, hard to understand, maybe empty or superficial. Something that is hebel can't be grasped, can't be controlled, neither physically or intellectually or spiritually. It's temporary and transient. The word hebel actually literally means a breath or a mist or a vapor or smoke. Okay, on a cold day, which you do have those here in North Hollywood once in a while, right? Is it ever cold enough to see your breath?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
At night.
Huh?
At night.
At night, yeah. And you've had a fire and you've seen the smoke. Can you grab smoke? Can you get a hold of smoke? Can you get your breath? No, it's just kind of there and gone. And that's this word hebel. And don't you feel that way about life sometimes? Like you reach for it and it's gone. That's what I wanted. That's what I thought. That's what I needed. That's what I was hoping for. And it's gone. That's this word. Life often goes directions that make no sense or seem unfair, and that's hebel. How have you, has anybody experienced hebel in their lives? And you don't need to answer, but how, think it, or if you want to say something, go ahead. How have you experienced hebel in your life? Where have you experienced hebel?
I think when we found out we couldn't have kids, it was very I knew I was okay with it. It was I had a strong desire for children, but it was gone. There was no hope for it, or not. I mean, God can do whatever He wants to do,
Sure.
But considering the circumstances, it's very likely. So it just seemed it was there, and then it's just gone.
It didn't seem fair.
Yeah, you're just okay, well, yeah.
And it wasn't right. And that's not how it's supposed to go. And, we all have those things. You're all thinking of something, right?
Mine was on the same line, almost, actually. We decided not to have kids for 5 years. And then, the next
5 minutes later.
the next day, she found out she was pregnant. And we were like, hey, we're not ready to have kids. Let's wait for 5 years or so. And then found out she was pregnant.
That was gone.
And that was hebel.
And then things.
I was like, no, that wasn't what we had in mind. That wasn't our plan.
Sorry, I didn't know you had church seat. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you can't sit here and fall asleep.
I'll keep my eye on you.
Chris, I think of some financial decisions that Mary Beth and I have made that we are convinced were the right thing, God-honoring thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody else will do something, some friends of ours or acquaintances will do something that we feel like is stupid or not truthful or whatever.
Okay, dishonest, yeah.
But then in the end, they have more money than us. It's wait a second, that doesn't, shouldn't I be the one that's prospering for doing the right thing?
That's hebel. That's hebel. A few years ago, we were in a situation before we moved to Simi Valley where I was actually working in construction during the recession, and all of the jobs dried up, and all of our savings dried up, and all of our 401k had to be drained to live, and our credit cards started going up. And we got to this place in life where there was no option, and we were begging money every month to pay our rent. And it's this is hell. And I literally said, Lord, we have served you our whole lives. We love you and we obey you and we've served, not perfectly, but we've done well. Why are you doing this to us? And felt a little bit like Job. We'll talk about Job here in a little bit. Hebel. So why does this kind of stuff happen in life? Why is there Hebel? Why can't you guys have kids? And I'm not talking biologically, I mean from a spiritual standpoint. Why did you have kids when you weren't planning on it? Why did we get into that situation of, why did God not bless us? Why does that happen? And I'm looking for some.
Because God has a greater plan, or a different plan for you.
Okay. Different plan. Not always easy to accept that, though.
I think for me it's reliance on Him, because I am so stubborn and self-reliant, and usually that's when there's the silence and I have my Hebel and I'm like, where are you? And He's like, I'm right here if you would just...
Like a 2x4 treatment?
I get that a lot, yeah. And even when I'm getting it, sometimes I'm still stubborn, so yeah.
Okay.
So reliance for me.
Other thoughts?
It's just not our story. It's God's
Okay.
story.
Okay. My story was this, this, and this, but God's story was this, this, and this.
And He has
this,
the whole view.
Yeah. Those are really good answers. I was looking for something a little more philosophical, maybe, but great answers. And I agree with everything you said. At the end of the day, I think that's it. But let's look at some other possibilities. Possibly, and this gets it. I forget your name, Utley.
Alicia.
Alicia. A-L-I-C-I-A?
A-L-Y-C-I-A.
Okay. Our daughter's Elise, so I should be able to remember that. Some of what you said there, sometimes life is Hebel because we're pursuing meaning and identity and significance in the wrong places. So look at chapter 2. I'm going to read through several of these verses and look at all the places. Best we know, and I really believe, Solomon was the author of the book of Ecclesiastes. Some disagree with that. They're wrong. Solomon wrote it. I think it's obvious. And so Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. He was probably the wealthiest man who ever lived. He took what all of us dream and took it to the furthest limits. On an earthly sense. So look at some of the stuff that he did. I thought with my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be Hebel, or meaningless. So has anybody ever pursued meaning and significance in life through pleasure? We all have, right? Food, a movie, a show, sex, whatever, okay? Whatever pleasure we can find. Meaningless. Hebel. Empty. Smoke. So number 2, verse 2. Laughter, I said, is foolish. And what does pleasure accomplish? So laughter doesn't even work. Verse 3. I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. And I wrote in my Bible here, the great hedonistic experiment. Let's try pleasure. Let's try laughter. Let's try wine. Let's try anything that makes me feel good. And Solomon's conclusion is, it's Hebel. It's like grabbing smoke. It doesn't work. So verse 4, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. So, money and wealth and projects. He built houses. He built all this stuff. He I don't know where you guys are at. He pursued a career in music. Try this out. He pursued a dance career. He pursued all this stuff that he wanted. And it was It was hell. And it says he had a harem. For those of you that don't know, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So he had 1,000 women in his harem.
Does it say that in this verse?
It doesn't say that here.
It's in Kings.
Harem. Yeah.
It doesn't say in this version, that's why.
Okay. What's your version say?
I acquired male and female singers to the lights of the sons of men and musical instruments.
Okay, harem's got a footnote. The meaning of the Hebrew for this phrase is uncertain. So NIV thinks it's a harem.
Oh.
You
I
have
see
ESV?
concubines in mine.
Yeah, I have beautiful concubines in mine.
Beautiful concubines.
Oh, for the singers? Okay. Verse 8.
Verse 8, yeah.
Anyway. I don't.
Regardless, from other scripture, we know that Solomon had 1,000 women.
Yes.
And we won't even try to figure that out.
Yeah.
Verse 9. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I would assume around here in this community and culture, there's people that are seeking fame. Most people that get into the film industry or the TV industry or the music industry or the, whatever, probably in the back of their minds want to be famous. Is that fair? I'm a stranger to this culture. But
You got that correct.
pardon?
I said you got that correct.
Got that correct. So there's fame. Well, a lot of what goes with fame, I mean, first of all, it's recognition, but there's also the wealth that goes with fame. It's Hebel. Solomon had it. He was more famous than anybody. I mean, we are 3,000 years removed from Solomon, and we still talk about it. That's fame. That's fame that probably, none of us around here in this community will ever achieve. So verse 10, he summed it up. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. I mean, can you imagine being able to do that? Anything you wanted, anything he wanted, he got it. Anything he wanted to do, he did it. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was Hebel, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. And we're going to see this phrase "under the sun" in here a couple times, and it simply means on earth. Mm-hmm. Nothing was gained. The sun shines on the earth, so nothing was gained on this earth. So when we try to find our identity, our significance, our life, and any of those kinds of things, it's Hebel. But I also want to suggest to you that sometimes, and we're, in case you forget where we're at, we're looking at the reasons why sometimes life is Hebel. Sometimes, I'm convinced, life just goes askew for maybe no really apparent good reasons. It's a fallen world. Life is messy. Stuff happens. And people that are God-fearing, pursuing good and righteous things, people that are living right, whatever that means, bad stuff happens. And I'm getting at that place in life where I kind of look around and go, you know what? Life is messy, and this is what I'm coming to. It's okay. That's just the way it is. It's not a judgment on me. God wasn't bonking me upside the head for being a bad boy whenever, certain things happened. Yeah, I think he had a bigger plan. He was moving. But sometimes stuff, I think God's in control of everything, and so nothing is random. But setting that aside, sometimes bad stuff just happens. The book of Job is kind of a partner book to the book of Ecclesiastes. They really kind of go together. And if you know the story of Job, he was a righteous man, and he lost everything. All of his children were killed. His health, all of his wealth was taken away. His health was taken away. And it was just because Satan wanted to beat up on him. God said, have at it. And Satan did. And the whole book of Job is these conversations between Job and his friends who were no encouragement whatsoever. They believed in what we call retribution theology. Retribution theology says if you're good, you'll prosper, and if you're evil, you'll suffer. If you're suffering, you must be evil. And if you're prospering, you must be good. That's that theological system. And the whole book of Job is to refute that. And to say, sometimes good people suffer, and sometimes the wicked prosper. Just like your financial story. And there is no good explainable reason sometimes. It's just the way it is. And I think the sooner we can come to terms with that and say, it's okay, the happier we'll be in life. Does it sound right that we'd be happy with things going wrong? I don't mean happy like, oh, goody, goody. I'm not talking that kind of happy. I'm talking deep joy, contentment, satisfaction.
Sounds like it could be an excuse for not pursuing righteousness. Like, whatever.
Could be. In other words, it doesn't matter how I live, so just do whatever I
Bad
want.
things happen, so whatever. Doesn't matter if I try to
Right.
combat that.
But see, Solomon will tell us that's not the case. We're getting there. Good point. Other questions, other comments? Tracking? So the basic message of Ecclesiastes, and I hate to even say that because I think it's kind of a complex message, but is that the pleasures of life are not ultimately fulfilling. The pleasures of life, the things of this world, the stuff under the sun, do not bring ultimate satisfaction. Whatever it is, money, wealth, fame, job, career, success, those things cannot offer lasting satisfaction. They're heaven. They're there. Those things are there for us to enjoy, and that's part of Ecclesiastes' message. Because a lot of people will say, well, if those things don't bring satisfaction, then let's deny ourselves all pleasures, and let's move out to the desert and live with no food and no water and no conveniences, because that's the spiritual thing to do. And people have done that. And Solomon would say, no, you're missing the point. No. Enjoy the things you have, but don't put your identity in those things. And that's, and I know you're just making comments, but to refute you, Solomon would say, life is found in God. Mm-hmm. Life is found in Christ alone. And I'm going to talk about Christ, even though he was 1,000 years after Solomon lived, but we can do that applicationally. Otherwise, we end up twisted and skewed, and life looks pretty heavy. Look at 2:24. A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This, too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. In other words, eat, drink, and enjoy your work. Because without God, we can't do that. Because what we'll do is we'll try to find meaning and life in eating and drinking and doing our work. No, don't try to find significance in those things, but enjoy them. Because God gives you the ability to enjoy those things. And then I'm going to jump to the end of the book because, and we're going to come back to this a little bit later. Chapter 12 and verse 13, Solomon wraps up this whole treatise, and he says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Okay? So after all of this rambling and ranting and talking and so on, here's the conclusion. This is the wisest man who ever lived, who had all this wealth and all this pleasure. And he says this, fear God and keep his commandments, For this is the whole duty of man. That's it. That's what Solomon is going to tell us. That life is only found in fearing God and obeying Him. It's not found in money or success or your career or pursuits or any of this stuff. It's found in Him. About 9 years ago, Jared mentioned we were in the pastorate for 18 years, full-time, pastored several different churches. And about 9 years ago, I can't believe it's been 9 years, I left the pastorate, kind of burned out, needed a break. And I remember in the first weeks after I resigned our church, was done, finished with that. In those first several weeks after that happened, I realized that I'd lost my identity. And my identity had been Pastor Chris. Didn't even know it, didn't even realize it. And all of a sudden, I wasn't Pastor Chris anymore. And I remember sitting one morning thinking, why should I even pray? What do I pray for? What's the point of reading my Bible? And that began a process of rediscovering my identity was in Christ. It wasn't in being a pastor. I felt like I'd lost the respect of my peers. I felt like, people looked down on me. I don't know if that was even true or not, but I felt that, and I just kind of lost it. And I learned that all the twists and turns of life are part of this journey to get us to refocus where we need to be. And sometimes we lose our dreams because God says, no, your dreams were your idols. And I am the only one you should be focused on. And so that process, I eventually came through that, and still I am, but learned my identity is not a pastor. My identity is a child of the King. I'm a child of Jesus. And even today, I would never say, I would say I work at Eternity Bible College, but I wouldn't say I'm a professor, that's my identity, or I'm a director of church relations, that's my identity, or I'm a teacher, no, I'm a child of the King. So if I lose my job tomorrow, and I go back to pounding nails, I'm not a contractor, I'm not a carpenter, I'm a child of the King. But it took all that banging around to get to that place to where I think I'm pretty secure in that being my identity now. And, something might happen in a week or a month or a year, and God baps me upside the head and I realize, I was putting my identity in that. And so that all these twists and turns are part of the journey. Now let's talk about this fearing God. Solomon repeatedly tells us that the answer, that we've just been talking, and please, again, ask questions or clarifications as we go along. The answer, the solution, the key to a successful, I'm going to use the word happy life, and by happy I mean contented and joyful and satisfying, is to fear God. Let's look at some of the texts that talk about that. 7:15. We okay on time? I have no idea what time it is.
Yeah, you got 30 minutes left.
Okay.
Maybe 32.
7:15, chapter 7, verse 15. In this meaningless life, or in this hebel life of mine, I have seen both of these. A righteous man perishing in his righteousness, and a wicked man living long in his wickedness. So you see that? See what he's saying? I've seen a righteous man who is perishing, is dying, and here's a wicked man who is living long, and it doesn't make sense, because the righteous should live long and the wicked should perish. So verse 16, do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? And just right off the top, let me say, these are real confusing verses. So if you're having a hard time following, you're in really good company. Do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. And here's the point. The man who fears God will avoid all extremes. So, when you read this, it sounds like he's saying, don't be too righteous. Just kind of keep a moderate level of righteousness and good living. Don't get over righteous. And then he's saying, in your wickedness, don't be too wicked. A little wicked's okay, but don't get too wicked. Don't take any of this to an extreme. Don't be extremely righteous and don't be extremely wicked, but have a balance. That's what it sounds like at first blush as you read this, right? I mean, is that kind of what it sounds like, or do you have no clue what it sounds like? That's right. And then he says the man who fears God will avoid all these extremes of being too righteous. But really, the idea is not, in verse 16, is that we shouldn't be, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining this, but we shouldn't be self-righteous. Mm-hmm. This is this Proverbs 3:7, wise in our own eyes. Mm-hmm. Don't think, I am so great, I am so wise, I am so righteous. Don't be self-righteous. And and then the extreme of wickedness is the idea of man's folly or man's foolishness. That will not prove satisfying. So self-righteousness is an extreme you don't want to go to, and living fully in man's folly is an extreme you want to go to. But if you fear God, you'll find the center. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that's why Ecclesiastes is so hard, because there's a lot of verses like this where you read it and go, what's he even saying? Or it sounds like he's saying this, but he's not. Let's go back to chapter 12. I just read this, but I want to read it again and focus on this. Not only was 12:9. Not only was the teacher wise, but also he imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. And I believe Solomon is writing here in the third person, talking about himself. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. That's our students' favorite verse right there. They often throw that out there, and it just doesn't work, doesn't fly. Verse 13, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. So at the end of the day, Solomon says, the conclusion of all this philosophizing in Ecclesiastes is a very philosophical book. All these books, all this analyzing, all this writing, all this talking, all this thinking, the conclusion is simply this: fear God and keep his commandments. Obedience to him. Eyes fixed on Christ alone. All of life lived to the glory of God. Success or failure, twists or turns, dreams that are successful or dreams that are shattered, keep your eyes fixed on God. Sorrow or grief, things that seem unfair, keep your eyes fixed on Christ alone. Because sometimes life just doesn't make sense. And we can't figure it out. And we're not supposed to figure it out. But we're just supposed to keep our eyes fixed on Christ alone. And keep following him. Because that's where there is purpose. If you've walked with Jesus for a long time, you know that even in the midst of some of the confusing stuff, if your eyes stay focused on him, you can pull through it. At the depths of some of our difficulties these last several years ago, we just kept our eyes fixed on Jesus. Didn't get it, didn't understand it, didn't like it, but we kept focused, kept going ahead. It wasn't always easy, but that was our trajectory, to just keep moving that way. And then back to 3:14. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere him. So the point of fearing God is because ultimately we can't do anything but fear God. We can't do anything. We can't make our dreams come true. You've tried? Didn't work. You can't chart the course of your life exactly the way you want it. You tried, and it went south. At the end of the day, God is the one who does what needs done. You guys can't make this NoHo church plant succeed. Jared can't make it succeed. Mary Beth can't make it succeed. You can't make it succeed. God is the one who'll make it succeed. So if it fails, you don't need to blame yourself. Don't blame God either. But understand sometimes that happens. I know that everything God does will endure forever. So if God does it, nobody can stop it. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere him. That's why he wants to do it, is so we worship him. If we make our life succeed and our plans succeed, then who do we worship? Ourselves. Look what I did. Look how I achieved it. So God destroys our plans and it makes his plan succeed, so we say, look what God did. He did it. So, I asked the question, how then shall we live? What do we do? How then do we take all this and I don't know, create a philosophy of life or create some action steps for waking up tomorrow morning and facing the day? And I have three points. Yeah, I am a preacher, so I have 3 points. They're not alliterated though. But each one has 2 words in it. So, number 1, fear God. Now let me ask you, what does it mean to fear God? We've been talking about this. Solomon says at the end of the day, fear God. What does it mean to fear God? Well, that's a discussion question.
To put him in front of everything and see him as the most powerful over anything that could possibly exist.
Wow, good. Put him in front of everything and see him as ultimately, supremely powerful. That's part of fearing God.
Sorry. Well, the fact that he keeps talking about judgment several times, like in verse 3:17, but God judged the righteous and the wicked, and I think in the latter part, chapter 11, know that, verse 9, know that for all these God will bring you to judgment. And again, the very last verse of the thing. There's the part of the fear of God, I think, is just pretty simple, that to understand that he will judge our lives, whether it's as believers or non-believers, but as Christians, stand before the judgment seat of Christ. And I think that's the motivation of fear. But there's a part of fear that's actually fearing that judgment and being aware of that awesome judgment.
Yeah. Should we be, this isn't a trick question, but, answer it. Should we be afraid of God?
I think there's an extent where people in the church always try to kind of argue against us being afraid. And I think that there's an amount where you should be scared of someone that powerful. Like I think about a boss or something that I really respect. They can fire me in a second. Part of it's that I'm like, oh, I don't want to screw up because I know how powerful they are. Yeah. But then a lot of it's because I really respect them and I want to do what they say. You know? Mm-hmm. So I think it's to an extent, yeah.
I agree. I think we should have. The Old Testament uses the word, faith translation uses the word terror. Mm-hmm. Think of who God is. Mm-hmm. He snapped this world into existence. We are breathing because he keeps our body functioning. He could stop our breath, our heart that quick. He could touch us and we would dissolve into molecules and atoms. I think there's a place to have fear of God. Now, should we consider him our Abba, Father, Papa, Daddy, that we can crawl up into his lap and put our arms around his neck and hug on him?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. Because those of us that know Jesus, for us, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to fear his wrathful judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean we should be disrespectful or flippant. I think that's part of fearing God, and I think you brought it out too. Of just, okay, if that's who God is, then I'm sold out to Him.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I do is going to point towards Him. What other thoughts on fearing God? What else comes to mind?
I always think of chapter 5 of Ecclesiastes whenever I think of fearing God, and that's what our little, or at least the ESV's little pericope says. But those first two verses, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they don't know what they're doing is evil. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God, for God is in heaven and you are on earth, therefore let your words be few. I think that expresses a healthy fear. Like you don't walk up to God and run in your mouth.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I wrote, look back, is when you said studied for a while, because I can easily see him as father, lover, Abba,
Yeah.
and fearing him was a hard thing. Because I didn't want to I didn't know how to balance that.
Sure.
I'm scared of you, you
Sure.
can kill me, versus I love you.
Yeah.
And so I wrote down that it means to have respect and reverence for him and to be in awe of his majesty and power. And for me to be in awe of him and just, it's still a fear, but not in the sense of I can't approach you too.
Right.
Because that would be hard. I just think of that balance when, as we were talking about it, I think of an abusive father. Like, and that is not how I wanted to think of God.
Right.
And so I had to define it.
Good. Unfortunately, using the image of a father isn't real helpful for everybody because there's a lot of abusive, dysfunctional fathers out there. If you have go ahead.
You can finish your thought.
Oh no, I'd rather you talk.
But I've been thinking about it as like a redirection of fear, because I think so many people fear the enemy over God, and we should know that God is more powerful, and so it's not. I don't always see it as a like fear me, but more of like a I'm more powerful,
Absolutely.
So,
Greater is he that is in the world. Greater is... How did that verse go? Greater is God than Satan. That's my paraphrase.
I think a lot of people focus on like, I love God, he's my father, and I fear
Yeah.
Satan because Satan could take me away, and we're not supposed to look at it that way.
No, not at all. No. The father image that I was starting to go to, if you have a healthy father image, I'll just speak of my father. My dad was a godly man. I loved him. I could hug him. But there was that thing where mom says, "Wait till your father gets home." There was fear. There was fear. There was respect. He was a whole lot bigger than I was, and he could inflict a certain amount of pain on me in an appropriate way. So there was fear in that way.
And God is all powerful.
Yeah.
A little more powerful than your dad.
Yes.
And he sees perfectly not just what we do, but in our heart. So it's like, hey,
He's perfectly loving. So when he does punish or discipline or it's never for a believer. It's never out of anger or wrath or like, okay, all right, I spanked you for that, but really it was your brother that did it. That never happens with God. He gets it right. Yeah.
Thank goodness, because that happens to me all the time.
Inappropriately punished. No, we're not going to air Randy's dirty laundry. So, how then should we live? Fear God. Focus and fix on Him. Number 2, work hard. Look at chapter 11 and verse 6. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let not your hands be idle. For you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. Isn't that helpful?
Sounds like a cat in the hat. Or that, but not,
It's an agricultural metaphor. And it's almost like saying, plant this field and plant this field. Work hard at planting your fields because you don't know which one's going to produce a better crop. It could be this one, or it could be that one, or maybe both, or maybe neither. You can't figure it out. You can't know the future, so be diligent. Mm-hmm. And I think as I was thinking of you guys planning a church here, nurture every contact. Mm-hmm. Meet with every person. Share the gospel every place you can. Mm-hmm. Work hard. Sow seed. Lots of it. But remember, only God can make it grow. Only God will bring success. Only God will do the harvest. Only He knows which people will respond and which people won't. Mm-hmm. You can't say, I'm not going to talk to that person because they don't look like they're, they don't look like they're going to respond. You can't do that because you have no idea. And so we work hard, and it sounds a lot like 1 Corinthians 3. And I have a hunch Paul may have had this part of Ecclesiastes in mind when he wrote 1 Corinthians 3, because he certainly knew the Old Testament well. 1 Corinthians 3:5 says, "What after all is Apollos, and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe. As the Lord has assigned to each his task, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow." So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. And so, I think, if you take Ecclesiastes as an existential book, you're just going to go out in the desert and build a little cabin and live there and do nothing. And that's not what Solomon is saying. He's saying, work hard, be diligent. You have no idea what's going to prosper. I mean, I think of Joy Lissa, and you have played in all kinds of clubs and all kinds of venues for all kinds of people and trying to get your EPs out there, and you have no idea what's going to succeed, what's going to connect, who's going to hear it. Mm-hmm. So you just work hard, you be diligent, you get it out there, and God is the one who will bring prosperity or not. And it's not necessarily because of how good you are or how not good you are. And it may have no rhyme or reason why it goes that way or doesn't. God's the one who makes it happen. Mm-hmm. So fear God, work hard, and number 3, enjoy the ride. Mm-hmm. Some have reacted to the message of Ecclesiastes and said, okay, screw it all, I'm going to go live like a monk. But Solomon makes it very clear that even though we don't find our identity and our meaning and our significance in all these things, we can enjoy them. In fact, I believe Solomon teaches we must enjoy them. There's a lot of pleasure in Ecclesiastes. Now he says don't find your meaning in pleasure. But let me just walk you through several verses. 2:24. And again, if you just take these verses, you're going to end up with a very hedonistic philosophy that you think is from the Bible. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have done that. But keep the balance. 2:24. A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This, too, I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? 3:22. So I saw that there is nothing better for a man than to enjoy his work, because that is his lot. For who can bring him to see what will happen after him? 5:18. Then I realized that it is good and proper for a man to eat and drink and to find satisfaction in his toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given him, for this is his lot. Moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and to be happy in his work, this is a gift of God. 8:15. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany him in his work all the days of the life God has given him under the sun. And 9:7. Go, eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for it is now that God favors what you do. Always be clothed in white and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this Hebel life that God has given you under the sun, all your Hebel days. For this is your lot in life and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for in the grave where you are going, it's kind of existential, there is neither working nor planning nor knowledge or wisdom. In other words, you're going to live life and die. So enjoy it. Enjoy what you have.
Basically, YOLO.
Pardon? YOLO? Not quite. Actually, that came up in class yesterday with some of my students. So this is a YOLO philosophy. You only live once. So, you guys, some of you are old enough to remember the old Miller commercials, was it? You only go around once, so grab for all the gusto you can get.
No, I'm not that old.
No.
No, I know you weren't. Anybody know those commercials? Beer commercials. It was the most existential, philosophical thing ever. You only go around once, so grab for all the gusto you can get. Miller.
Amen.
Or Budweiser, or whatever it was. That's not the message of Ecclesiastes. But some have taken that as the message of Ecclesiastes. You see how confusing this can be if you distort it or twist it? It comes down to fear God, work hard, and enjoy the ride.